Excellencies, colleagues, good afternoon, and perhaps good morning and good evening as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. So welcome to our event, Partnering for Peace, Private Sector Solutions to Harness Local Renewable Energy for Peacekeeping. I'm Tori Holt of the Stimson Center, and I am here today. We are pleased to be co-hosting this timely and rapidly evolving peacekeeping missions and meeting UN's goal of renewable energy power use and to support the mission mandates and long-term sustainable development. UN exclusively from diesel, and they are among the largest and most reliable customers in host communities. And host community benefits. Today we'll make use of our outstanding speakers who have experience with the good, the bad, and the deeply practical aspects of this model to meet the two tasks that Emirates to the United Nations, as well as the Powering Peace Initiative, which is a joint initiative of the Stimson Center and Energy Peace Partners and the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. So the first is who needs to do what in the field to procure renewable energy from the host community markets. In farmers markets terms, to buy local. The second task is to start outlining how we pull together these experiences from the field, broader coherent strategy towards 2030, so that it is cross-cutting and usable in many operations. So I will do my best to firmly and politely move us through the agenda and close at 2:30 p.m. New York time. So we're going to kick this off with some guiding macro level remarks from our co-hosts, including UN Assistant Secretary General in the Department of Operational Support, the Director General of IRENA, and the President of Energy Peace Partners. Then we will turn to specific project in our panel discussion, where we are lucky to have two SRSGs from Somalia, from Democratic Republic of Congo, each of whom leads peace operations, in addition to two executives from some of the most innovative. I will then open up the floor for interventions and comments and questions from all of you. So first, to jump in, I'd like to turn to two of the co-hosts today. First, to Ambassador Nawal Al-Hassani, who's a permanent representative of the UAE to IRENA. Dr. Nawal, the screen is yours.
Different needs and opportunities across sectors. And there has never been a better time to discuss such energy choices, given that the cost revolution that has taken shape over the past few years. We are now at a point where renewable energy is almost always the least expensive power choice, including in my own country. Renewables is even stronger for communities and operations that use diesel. But energy for peacekeeping is also very complicated, as you rightly said, occurring in situations where there are many pressing demands, diverse stakeholders, changing base locations, and much at stake. From the perspective of the United Arab Emirates, it's very important that we are very practical and start with the recognition that renewable energy is not always going to be the optimal choice, and that there will be still a role for diesel, especially during the transition phase or in to overcome intermittence. But with that acknowledgement, we must examine the exceptional opportunities presented by the low cost of renewable energy, where renewables make sense. Four opportunity areas, if I may, and then some ideas on how we can move forward with assessment. First, peacekeeping budgets are always under financial pressure. If we can reduce diesel cost by buying local renewable power, This will present significant cost savings for member states. Second, there are clear security risks to cross-line transfer of diesel that could be or would be mitigated by having localized power for peacekeeping missions. Third, at a time when the United Nations is pushing for climate ambition, it is important that the institution for the institution to walk the talk and lead by example, especially in the last mile context. The UN commitments to renewable energy will only be met by 2030 if in the shift to renewables. Last, and perhaps I think most importantly, to your point, Tori, peacekeeping missions are often among the largest and most reliable energy customers in their host countries and communities, spending enormous amounts of money to import energy in places that often have the lowest energy access rate in the world, as well as the most expensive electricity. In areas where the conditions are right, however, the United Nations could stop importing and instead buy renewable power from local providers, leveraging customer. These local providers could in turn expand or build their renewable power infrastructure to serve local communities and leaving a positive legacy that outlasts the peacekeeping missions themselves. These incentives for the UN and the local private sector have never been aligned. Those opportunities require evaluation, clearly, and I think we have two very promising starting points. First, peacekeeping missions are updating their energy plan. This is the window to understand in practice what a higher share of renewable energy would look like and what would need to happen. Second, IRENA and the Department of Operational Support have signed a groundbreaking MOU that offers IRENA support to host countries on frameworks that allow local companies to sell power to the UN, a need that is beyond the mandate of peacekeeping missions. I accordingly think that as a group, we can bring together the different mandates and skills to identify the renewable energy opportunity for peacekeeping and make a contribution to the UN 80% target. On our side, we will be working with Norway, IRENA, the UN, and other partners in the coming months to put together a more complete roadmap. So I'm very much looking forward to speaking with all interested parties and especially to hearing the perspectives and perhaps reality check of our distinguished speakers today on this promising public-private model. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nawal. You've already kicked us off with some terrific insights and some strong recommendations. Let me turn next to Hans Olaf Abreck, Norway's Special Envoy for Climate and Security. Hans Olaf, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tori, and also thanks to Dr. Nawal for so eloquently setting the stage for our discussion here tonight. And let me also from the outset commend the work of Energy Peace Partners and the Stimson Center for putting the issue of renewable energy and peacekeeping on the agenda. As we've heard just from Dr. Nawal, to meet the ambitious carbon reduction and renewable energy targets of the UN Secretariat's Climate Action Plan, the UN must transform its approach to sourcing and generating power and rapidly move away from its current heavy reliance on diesel generators. UN missions operate about 10,000 diesel generators. 70% of them are owned by the UN. In addition, in partly the same geographies, humanitarian agencies also operate about the same generator. Across missions is only 3%, according to the report from Stimson Center and Energy Peace Partners. At this event, we will focus on private sector solutions to harness local renewable energy for peacekeeping. And also has been presented by Dr. Nawal, the case for increased use of renewable energy is clearly compelling. The market seems to be there, more than 20,000 diesel generators. We need to develop new innovative solutions to tap into this market. We need to establish partnerships, and of course, we need to scale up action, and we need leadership. Let me underscore the point, we need leadership. At this event, we will see examples of leadership from leaders in the UN, leadership from IRENA and the SRSGs of key UN operations, and from the private sector. Norway is a strong partner to both UN Peacekeeping and IRENA, and we welcome the MOU between IRENA and DOS. Through this partnership, IRENA and the UN will work with countries that host UN peacekeeping operations to identify host country policy, regulatory and technical measures that will help increase the renewable energy share. In addition, IRENA will assist the UN to strengthen renewable energy power generation in these areas through encouraging private sector investment. I'm confident that this partnership will yield positive results. We will do, as Norway will do our share in the Security Council to advance the agenda, and look forward to working closely with the UAE on this issue next year, because we need more like-minded partners on the Council to move this agenda forward. Colleagues, supplying missions with sufficient energy has been among the foremost challenges of planners. Fuel to remote and by convoys warrant a sustained effort to address these challenges. Sustainable and clean energy may help missions deliver benefits inside and outside the fence. It will save money, it will improve efficiency, it will enhance security, it will maintain, it will help to kickstart local access to energy or investments benefiting local communities. It will also reduce pollution and it will reduce corruption while meeting their mandates. So this is clearly win-win. At this event, we will hear promising examples of this transition from Somalia. Going forward, let me ensure that missions develop environmental scorecards to monitor performance. We need to ensure that mission budgets reflect their energy plans. We also need to simplify procurement practices to enable the use of renewable energy, as was also highlighted by Dr. Naval. We also need to further explore technological win-win solutions that and operational effectiveness. We also need to encourage troop and police contributing countries to share their best national practices. And we need to ensure that missions have access to necessary expertise, both at the mission level and at HQ. Let me also stress the importance of the need to broaden the decision-making structures around renewable energy solutions to involve substantive mission personnel in order to integrate conflict analysis and political risk and opportunities as part of decision-making around the mission's solar energy systems. The commitments from senior political and military leadership on sustainability. A peacekeeping mission properly organized for climate change is one that will be better able to execute its mandate. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans Olaf. For your leadership. The nature of this problem set. You've really advanced the conversation, so thank you. So as you and Dr. Nawal mentioned, there are a key number of factors that cut across peacekeeping contexts and influence the success of renewable energy. I also appreciate your emphasis on leadership. So now, speaking of leadership, I would like to turn to bring in some major actors on the implementation and the policy side, as well as on the research front, to help us understand the big picture trends that influence the viability of public-private models for renewable energy supply to missions and potentially address the issues you already raised. So first, Assistant Secretary General Christian Saunders. You are the head of supply chain management in the UN Department of Operational Support, which assists all peacekeeping and peace operations and facilities management. Your department has also recently launched the second renewable energy from local providers of peace operations. Over to you, Assistant Secretary General.
Thank you, Tori, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I had a prepared speech, but Dr. Nawal and Hans Olaf have covered the issues that I was going to address. So in order to leave more time for discussion, I'm not going to repeat what they've said. I'm just going to say that my the United Nations, the Department of Operational Support, are completely committed to increasing the amount of renewable energy that is used by our peacekeeping operation. We clearly understand that this is an important and security in the countries and to the development and to achieving the SDGs. I would say just one response in terms of a point made by Hans Olaf, and that was the simplification of the procurement procedures. I would just like to point out that we've already done that. For example, the initiative that is ongoing in Somalia and the one that is ongoing in Mali went through our procurement process and went through the procurement process relatively quickly and relatively seamlessly. So that's one step in the right direction. So I'm not going to say much more, but to thank the permanent missions of the UAE and of Norway, and to hand the floor back to you so we can have more time for discussion. Over.
Well, thank you very much. I do think that the environment strategy and the next phase that you've kicked off may be of interest to our audience, so I won't put you on the spot right now. Priorities in that and how you want to move forward would be something that.
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're playing a role in policy that missions struggle. We've recently just heard about the MOU that's been signed between the department, DOS, as well as ARENA. So, Francesco Locamera, you are the Director General of ARENA, and you recently signed that MOU with the UN Department of Operational Support in this nexus of energy and peacekeeping. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Victoria. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to show a solution to enhance local renewable energy for peacekeeping, together with the permanent representative of Norway and the UAE to the UN, Powering Peace and the Stimson Center. The energy transition is about more than simply exchanging one technology for another. It is a systemic change in the relationship between people, economies, and energy. It is interconnected with issues of social justice and environmental awareness. The provision of clean and affordable energy is essential for socioeconomic development and key to people and community all over the world. Renewable energy technologies offer us an opportunity to provide clean and easy of renewable energy solutions in this priority sector, building partnership with UN institutions like the FAO or WWF organization. Today, renewables are the cheapest source, as Dr. Naval has very clearly said, of new power generation in most of the world and account for the overwhelming share of new capacity addition each year. Last year, 80% of the capacity was renewable. The transition is also an enabler of sustainable low carbon growth. Every US $1 million but we know that our role as the voice of the energy transition based on renewable is not over. Countries are still making. Through objective analysis, they show that not only the transition is possible, but it's also attractive. If managed well, we can make this has undertaken a validation of this assessment and the where peacekeeping operations are taking place. In Lebanon, ARENA carried out an outlook report with concrete recommendations and established a strong link with local stakeholders. Engaged with Sudan and Iraq, drafting their with UN. We identified renewable solution for refugee settlements in 2 refugee camps in Iraq. But it's much more that we can do. To this end, ARENA, has been said, has recently signed a memorandum of understanding with UNDOS, seeking to provide a framework to scale up the deployment of renewable energy, particularly in relation to peacekeeping and in countries hosting large UN peacekeeping missions. In this regard, ARENA aims to support the UN's objective to strengthen renewable power generation in these areas by encouraging private sector to ensure that it is possible. Together we can help to create the market conditions needed to encourage investment and drive the energy transition. We can build infrastructure that outlives peacekeeping missions and leaves a positive and lasting legacy in host countries. I look forward to cooperating with our partners and countries hosting peacekeeping operations to international cooperation and strong partnership will be critical to successfully achieving our collective goals. I look Thank you very much for the attention. And back to you, Victoria.
Thank you. Appreciate your vision and leadership on this, and it's very exciting and promising to see ARENA enter this area and also bring focus to market development that's country-led and very practical. I'd like to close out this segment by next turning to a very good colleague of mine, David Mozerski. He is the president of Energy Peace Partners. Tell us about some of the findings from the research and his colleagues, which includes us at the Stimson Center, have undertaken on energy and peace ops around the globe. So Dave, what is your view on the key takeaways on private sector provision of renewable energy? Over to you.
Thank you, Tori, and good afternoon and good evening to all. My name is Dave Mozerski, and I'm with Energy Peace Partners. Together with Tori and the Stimson Center, we lead the Powering Peace initiative, which over the last few years has been exploring opportunities to accelerate the transition to renewable energy by UN peacekeeping, both for the benefit of the missions and as part of the UN's climate commitments, and as a way to support new renewable energy development in fragile, electrified countries, which tend to receive little renewable energy investment. We've conducted an institutional analysis around energy provision and peacekeeping, as well as country and mission-specific case studies. We've looked at 8 different missions and conducted in-depth research in South Sudan, DRC, and Mali thus far. I'll provide a quick summary of some of our key findings. There's been progress on this agenda, but a system-wide transformation is required for UN peacekeeping to move from sourcing just 4% renewable energy in 2020 to achieving the UN Secretariat goal of 80% by 2030. We've identified 3 models of how renewable energy projects have been developed across UN peacekeeping. The most common is in-house procurement, where a mission uses its existing budget to purchase the renewable energy equipment. The most prominent examples are UNMISS executed solar and battery equipment purchased in late 2016, eventually built a solar system in Juba last year, and a 1.2 megawatt solar system in WOW that's close to completion. Both systems are behind the fence, meaning they only power UN operations. This purchase was made possible by an end-of-year UNMISS budget surplus in 2016, which is hard to replicate or plan for. Generally, the size of in-house purchases is quite limited. This model is difficult to scale or significantly increase because of the constraints of short-term mission funding cycles and the high upfront one-time costs of renewable energy systems. The second model we've seen is the mission connecting to local clean power grids. In the DRC, MONUSCO was able to transition 2 of its field sites in the east from diesel to hydropower by connecting to the local Virunga power line. Other sites in Kinshasa and Goma are also connected to the national utilities. Web. A PPA is a projects all over the world. PPA finance over a set period of time. It's effective for the UN and leverage private sector company to justify the upfront investment to build the power plant. This is particularly valuable in many of the countries that host UN missions, often fragiles with low levels of electrification, where UN field sites are often the largest energy producer and consumer in the area. The PPA allows for private sector energy development by leveraging the UN can help solve the finance constraints related to the upfront purchase costs of systems, which can be a barrier given the short-term funding cycles of missions. Second, with the UN entry team and host program. It also offers a new way with Virunga Energies in Eastern DRC, which has peace building, development, and conservation objectives built into its core mission. We'll also do solar could allow of the 2015 peace agreement, which highlights solar energy as a key to increased development in conflict-affected northern Mali. With that, I'll hand it back to Tori and our next set of speakers from DRC and Somalia. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dave. Those are great examples and a really fantastic segue into our panel discussion, where we'll get a deeper dive into specific missions and renewable energy projects. And now I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel speakers. last year signing an agreement with a private company. In fact, your fellow panelists today from Cube Energy, to supply solar panel to the joint UN African Union camp in Baidoa. What is particularly unprecedented is that the arrangement with the mission allows for power to be sold into the local market. Could you tell us a bit about this project, how it came into being, and your observations? SRSG, over to you. Thank you very much, SRC Swan. It's great to get your perspective up close on this. I'm going to turn next to Christian, who's been involved very much in one of the most active private sector renewable energy projects in a conflict setting, namely there in Somalia and partnering with the UN. Could you tell us a bit briefly about CUBE and from your perspective, what process led to this unique public-private partnership? And what are some of the challenges you face and lessons learned from Somalia? Christian.
which makes a big difference. But there was no established route on the UN side on how to enter in the power purchase agreement. So there was a lot of back and forth, you know. I think it's a pretty new tough contract on the UN side. The other one relates, and it has been already mentioned by Irena and other speakers, to the policy vacuum. I think Somalia is a nascent country that is working at developing its energy sector regulations. And it could be difficult sometimes to navigate that and apply some standards, and particularly between the state and the federal governments. I think another point on the policy vacuum the access to land and land tenure is also one of the challenge. I think this has been, drivers of conflict in Somalia, but also in other countries. But, for a solar project, it's particularly important. Another challenge is the time for developing projects. For us, Baidoa and some of other projects takes a very long time to bring to conclusion, which can affect, the trust, down the line of partners into the project. In one side, we're reassuring, investors and our partners that the project will start, and on the other side, the government. So it's always, a very difficult balance to strike between all the different partners. And lastly, and I think I'll stop here. I think the lack of available infrastructure for private companies, the SRG was mentioning that they were airlifting, the fuel to Baidoa. I think we're facing the same of challenge, and that we are referring more to accommodation and transport in country for the staff. I think thanks to the UN in Somalia, which has supported the first trip back in 2018 to Baidoa, this has allowed us to get the preliminary feasibility study. This is the kind of support that remains critical, even for companies that operate in this kind of context. Thanks.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm going to briefly go back to SRC Swan and just link these two sets of comments. Kristen has just helpfully pointed out some of the challenges with setting up the right processes, encouraging investors, and putting together incentives and disincentives. And you have a vision, a bit of a legacy. Is there anything more you could add, SRSG, about what has Baidoa meant for the outlook for future additional renewable energy projects? And what would be useful going forward? And I know it's a little early to ask you, but I thought I would.
Importantly, Southwest State itself was highly enthusiastic and supportive in taking the initiative to encourage this type of renewable project and this sort of public-private partnership. So this is a good place to start and to build on. I think that in Somalia, we have 6 field offices, of which Baidoa is one. So should this activity prove successful, should the concept be demonstrated to function well, there obviously would be opportunities to potentially to scale it to other locations, replicate it in other locations. There are many complexities, including around, again, the level of support from the federal member state authorities, including security issues, including questions about the availability of local producers who would be prepared to sell. I think there are many, many issues also involving, frankly, the level of economic activity in some locations. But it certainly could potentially be a model that could be used elsewhere. And again, as we and other UN entities are trying to increase our use of renewables in consistent with the objectives set by the Secretary General, we're going to have to look for other ways to do it. But I think if the Baidoa model proves to be successful, we will be eager to look at other ways in which it could be used in Somalia. And again, as the other panelists have noted, possibly in other locations, something similar could be undertaken. As with anything new, it needs to be proven. There need to be a couple of demonstrated successes achieved, and at that point, people will become increasingly comfortable with the opportunity. And so we'd like to be a part of modeling this. I should also note, we have had good support out of our headquarters team in New York. Obviously, with anything that is being started for the first time, there are complexities and difficulties, but we are very much reassured that those policies and procedures are being adapted in order to make this more viable and more feasible. Not only should we seek to pursue it further here, but for other missions as well. And in terms of trying to resolve some of the inevitable problems that crop up in this kind of situation, a lot of it is a matter of patience and perseverance and continuing to nudge it forward. I should note we're privileged this week, in fact, to have a visit by Atul Khare, who is the Undersecretary General for the Department of Operations Support, DOS, which recently concluded this memorandum of understanding with IRENA. So he's in country, and he'll actually be traveling to Baidoa tomorrow. He has obviously a heavy agenda of other issues, but among them will be seeking to ensure that this Baidoa project continues to get attention and to advance.
Thanks very much. That's a very helpful reminder. It's still early days for this. And in addition, the Undersecretary Zucari has promoted, Christian Saunders with us today, this environment strategy. And the second phase of it really does kick off additional attention to energy, among other aspects. So I think just to echo what you're saying, happening at quarters. I'm going to ask the last question, Christian, before we go to the Congo, and just say to him, so the challenge says, let me ask you, what more could you say from your experience so far are the practical things that would better prepare to help work with missions from the private sector perspective, or help encourage the private sector to look at conflict zones as a potential place to operate? If you have any additional insights on those 2 points.
Thanks, Daria. I think I would just also react to the comment of the SRSG. I think, yeah, it takes years to develop project, which, you know, which is a bit like strange in a way, because it takes only a few weeks to build a solar plant. And so definitely patience and perseverance also on the private sector side is an advantage. And so I think, you know, there is definitely traction for renewable energy, because I think people and organizations realize that the issue is technology. I think it's a done deal now. The project in Baidoa, but other projects we have in South Sudan with IOM or UNHCR in Kenya, I think that project that can demonstrate that the transition at no cost for the UN is possible. And I think that some of this project can have an impact outside the UN compounds. I think that's one important element that we're trying to demonstrate. And we hope that the Baidoa will be a catalyst in this regard, a project that people will look at as a model. And that said, I believe that the private sector does have a role to play, and there are a number of things that are working in our favor to help UN missions transition to renewables. So now I have an opportunity to make some suggestions to better prepare missions to engage with private sector. So I think at first, at strategic level, I think that the transition to renewables should not be treated only as a technical issue. I think there should be some to procurement, to civil should include a discussion to explore other approaches, but also the potential, you know, and look at, you know, what is best for the mission and for the implementation of the mandate. There is definitely not one solution fits all, and the private sector doesn't have all the solutions. I think our areas women operates are very complex, therefore to be pragmatic and flexible. I think the UN missions should be open to listen to private sector actors and what they can offer. I think the UN mission have still some, you know, so much learning to gain from the projects, and also us as a company. For instance, you know, collecting data on energy requirements to define, you know, their real needs. It's a very basic one, but it's most of the missions, you know, it's not done. I think we're still looking at good models, but we always, you know, are dependent of people ready to take some risk. We need, you know, champions within missions to really bring the projects, you know, out of the ground. And as the SRG mentioned, I think we need to build this portfolio of reference projects, so we have a better understanding of in peacekeeping. Also, you know, I'm speaking maybe as a former UN staff and thinking about development and UN legacy after closing up Cote d'Ivoire and Liberia. The issue is who has ownership of project. You know, I don't think the UN should initiate projects or have the ownership of this project, but playing a role as a partner, as a catalyst by defining their energy needs, unlock opportunities for private sectors, but also for the public sector. I think for a lot of this context, it will be better to have infrastructure left beyond that are not UN property. I think promoting a model that allows infrastructure development will be a win-win situation for the host country, the UN, SDGs implementation. And I think finally, my point is that, you know, I think the solar technology is not an issue. There is a market here, but we don't expect much technical development on solar PV or panel. I think we should think also already about how this can add more renewable components. You know, I think it's time also to look forward and for Peace Mission to be open to other technology. You know, like in 5 or 10 years, vehicles should be electrical. I think there are amazing opportunities, and sorry, I'm overly excited, but to bring cost of solar system down, you know, by fully integrating these various components together into one renewable energy ecosystem, can have a huge impact on energy requirements. And maybe lastly, I think, you know, the Baidoa project here, I mean, as the challenges that I've mentioned earlier, yeah, we're very optimistic that, you know, the project will take place, and that you know, by the end of the year or early next year, the project will be able to supply electricity to the UN and other off-takers in Baidoa. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kristen. It's really great to know that you're both working in Somalia and so enthusiastic about what the opportunities are. But your point about is a natural segue to turn next to our colleagues who are in the Democratic Republic of Congo and MONUSCO in particular. And I'm thrilled that we are joined today by SRSG Bintu Keita, who's the head of the MONUSCO mission and is well known to many here. MONUSCO is another example of a first mover in the renewable energy space, and it offers an interesting model where the mission purchases hydropower from existing local suppliers. So we have both the SRSG and then her co-panelists from Virunga Energy, as well as they've purchased energy from the Congolese national utility, SNEL. So SRSG, could you tell us a little bit about the impact that this local supply of hydropower has had on the mission and your perspectives? Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Nice to see you over this virtual platform, and want to first thank both permanent representatives of UAE and Norway, and also Irena. And it's nice also to have SRSG1 on this same virtual meeting, and former colleague Kristen to be joining also this discussion. So, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, the way I want to start before responding to your question, Victoria, I was very much surprised when I arrived in March this year in DRC. I went and met the president of the National Assembly, and actually is the one who made me aware that DRC is the second largest rainforest in the world. So somehow, in the context of DRC, there is a global public good, which is the Eastern DRC part mostly, and it's also the zone where we have the conflict. And at the same time, we are engaged in discussions and conversation with the government with regard to the transition of MONUSCO in a responsible, gradual, and durable or sustainable manner. And we have to go to the Security Council this year in September with how we see the transition moving forward, and particularly in Eastern DRC, the conflict zone, and largely within security. And the reason why I'm bringing this is because I have nothing to take as credit for the leadership of MONUSCO in terms of where they are today with the implementation of access to renewable energy. The DMSs and the one I have now and the teams, they are very much enthusiastic about increasing the use of renewable energy for the mission. And when I was looking at it, I was thinking to myself, maybe we should have benchmarks and indicators as part of our transition discussions, and piggybacking on what was said by some of the panelists in terms of legacy for the mission in the peacekeeping mission in DRC. And interestingly, this is also the second largest peacekeeping mission in the realm of peacekeeping operations. So there is a lot there, and I do believe that if we put all of this in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, with some of them very particular in terms of environment and climate action, then we have a chance to broaden the partnership beyond MONUSCO with regard to the impact. And I am very happy because I just received, it was like a coincidental, over the weekend, a request from USG Atul Khare to engage in a conversation with the national authorities with regard to signing a global compact on this. And I know that I will have ears and willingness to engage on all of this. So now coming back to MONUSCO as a peacekeeping mission and what has been done within the mission. First of all, I have to say that when this has been put in place at the United Nations Secretariat Action Plan in 2019, the mission has set for itself a number of targets. One, which is 40% of the use of renewable energy hydroelectric in 2025 and 80% by 2030. With this, I'm very pleased to report that actually today we are already at 37% of the use of hydroelectric power source for the mission. And just to refer back to what was said by, I think it was Mr. Mozersky, we are in the model 2 of using, this is a model 2 because you had highlighted 3 models, we are in model 2. So when I look at, and I'm quite excited to be also at the realm of MONUSCO at this time, because at the end of this year, we believe that we are going to be at 43, which means that we will be exceeding the targets that we have already put for 2025. And this in a combination of hydroelectric power, but also some solar energy with, let's say, 3.2% complementing of the electricity. And when looking at now some of the important in terms of the impact on the mission, for those who are in the controller's office or those who are discussing the SEABQ or the 5th committee, I'm very pleased to say that we have like a 1.3 million per year of what we call a reduction in and this is in US dollars, for the use of fossil fuels, as well as we are reducing emissions. That, for me, is very important as a result. Also, it's very important that I mention, as I said already, that while we were looking at 2025 to be at 40%, mostly by end of next year, we will have reached that target. So this is one point. So with regard to your first question, so I don't know if you have a second question for me, because this I will go with more of the challenges.
You've given us a fantastic view of what's already been happening and the success working in Congo. So yes, maybe one quick question before I turn to your colleague, Emmanuel. Is there anything more specific you think would take the mission to even more increase its renewables, or anything that your mission support has taught you about what might help other missions? Maybe your challenge is
First of yes, one of the challenges is the potential that exists within country with the right level of engagement from private donors, let's say investors, as well as ensuring that the government in the discussions on how to improve the access to electricity, for instance, for the population. Here we are at 16% of people who have access to electricity. So as part of the expansion, I think it's important that we have advocacy in the right place, and with support also from headquarters. And I believe DOS and also the United Nations Global Service Center can be helpful. And we can look at what Somalia is doing now with the PPA to see how we can increase what is available for the country. And that's also of legacy. So just to give you an example where I was struck by the data that were given to me, in Congo, we have a potential of more than 100,000 megawatts. And we are only using 2.5 of this potential. So just to say, so putting into perspective at the continental level, it's not just a DRC, it's DRC and beyond borders of DRC. So this for me is key. And now maybe just to finish on this is that for the targets that have been put forward in 2019 and looking at where we are, I do believe that with further support, we can even go further in terms of helping a better legacy for the mission.
Fantastic. Those are really tremendous numbers, incredible potential. I want to turn now to Emmanuel, who is the director of Virunga National Park in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I will say, for many of you who know this, he's a world famous conservationist. He's been working for over 2 decades to sustain this incredibly important park throughout the conflict and illegal resource extraction. And interestingly, the national park owns Virunga Energies, which signed the power purchase agreement with MONUSCO. So, Emmanuel, could you tell us a bit about why a national park is involved with renewable energy in a peacekeeping mission? And what is having the UN as a client meant for you, for your operations? And based on your own experience, what's the scope of expansion of power sales to the United Nations? So thank you, and over to you.
Well, thank you very much. I feel very privileged to be here. I live in a much smaller world than all of the other panelists, but what I'd like to do is to try and really outline how our journey in Virunga, which started certainly as far as I was concerned, but also as far as our current program concerned, started about 21 years ago, which is roughly the same time as when the UN mission MONUSCO started in the DRC as well. And so our lives have run alongside each other for very many years, and certainly on the energy in the energy sector have become somewhat more intertwined in a very positive way. But really what I'll do is just give you just a very quick overview of what Virunga National Park is, for those who may not have heard of it. So really to understand Virunga, you have to imagine an absolutely extraordinary landscape right at the center of the African continent, perhaps one of the most beautiful landscapes on Earth. It's also a landscape that contains probably the most exceptional level of species diversity, of biodiversity for any protected area on the planet. It's I'm not sure if you're still hearing me.
Yes, we are.
Okay, wonderful. So it's a national park that spans, both an amazing number of species, but also landscapes. From the summits of the Rwenzori's with its glaciers at over 17,000 feet, down into the Ituri forests in the north of the park at less than 3,000 feet. And of course, it's those landscapes that create this incredible potential, not just for biodiversity, which had it listed as the first UNESCO World Heritage Site, but also with its high rainfall, its extreme landscapes and its forests that stabilize the water flows, this amazing opportunity to generate electricity. But the reasons why we focused on energy so much really date back to 2007, a very, very difficult year for everybody in Eastern Congo. It was the year that the CNDP started a civil, but it was also for us the year when we realized that our entire strategy for safeguarding our national health expressed was through the mass killings, as it were, of the mountain gorillas. We lost a large number of mountain gorillas in a very short time. They were killed by automatic rifles in a way that we couldn't understand why. But what we did know was that our whole approach to wildlife conservation, based on a very traditional model of protecting that wildlife, wasn't working. And so we really had to take a step back and try and understand what was happening. And what really became clear was that the reason those mountain gorillas were being killed was because people wanted the meat or to sell the baby gorillas in the wildlife trafficking networks, but rather because they were interested in habitats and they were interested in forests for the fuelwood. And so really what was killing the gorillas was an energy crisis that we were faced with. But where this really brings us closer to the work of the UN mission was when you further analyze the problem and really came to understand the power relationships around those energy networks emanating from the park, and came to realize that those who were controlling it was the FDLR, this militia group that left Rwanda in 94 after the terrible events of the Rwandan genocide, and settled in the forests of Congo and particularly in Virunga, and developed what is now understood to be a war economy, sustained them now for almost for over 25 years, and really has been the source of so much suffering and such a struggle for so many, including the UN mission. What we came to realize was that the revenue being generated from charcoal from Virunga's forests is currently worth between $40 and $50 million a year. Of course, that sort of revenue is enough to sustain an army. It's enough to fund a war. And if you look at every single UN group of experts report since it started in 2001, every single one refers to the illegal exploitation of natural resources as the one of the key underlying causes of armed conflict, of civil war in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so really that's what brings us, I say. But there's another aspect to that as well, which is that in struggling with these issues, Virunga has taken enormous losses. There is no park on earth that's been faced with so much tragedy as Virunga. Over 200 of our staff have been killed. We've come to understand that a young ranger who joins the force has a 37% chance of suffering a violent death before the end of their career. There's no public service on earth that suffers a rate of attrition that's quite as difficult as that. In the last 12 months, we've lost 21 of our staff. But what's important is that those young men and women have been killed for the most part, not protecting the wildlife, but actually protecting the people living or moving through the park. and over 60% of our staff have been killed protecting civilians, doing the same work that our colleagues in the UN are doing in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And of course, you know, one difference is that we're struggling enormously for lack of resources. Virunga is a park that runs on minimal resources, but those amount to about $13 million a year. From the state, we receive less than 100,000. So less than 1% of our budget is provided from public funds from the government. And so we have to be creative about that. And so that was the second reason we really got interested in the energy sector, was because of the enormous potential park, which can generate, discovered in 2010 as part of this energy, that it could generate about 105 megawatts from its rivers, by building run-of-river, so ecologically very sound power plants outside the national park, but drawing on the rivers, on the watersheds within the national park. And so we started building these power plants. We're now at 30 megawatts. We're about to start our biggest project, which is an additional 28 megawatts. So it will be over 58 megawatts, the biggest source of energy in Eastern Congo. But what's been the most interesting of all, and I think that's where really, you know, we really need to talk more with our colleagues in the UN and all of their partners, is what that represents downstream. What we found is that every megawatt of energy that is distributed in the community creates between 800 and 1,000 jobs. 11% of those jobs are ex-combatants from the armed groups. And so there's this extraordinary opportunity to reintegrate ex-combatants that has never existed before in many ways, and really has been the biggest challenge on the DDR programs, the disarmament, demobilization, and reinsertion programs, where the programs have really failed because of the inability to find employment for young men and women. And so energy really overcomes that challenge, and that's what's been so interesting. Where we've really struggled is bringing the energy to market. So, you know, we've built incredibly competent, capable, creative teams of Congolese engineers and technicians who built the power plants, built the networks, but we're really struggling to really access the market. And of course, you know, the UN bases offer a huge opportunity there. We've had a lot of success in some of the small rural towns. We're still working on Goma, and Goma really is an enormous opportunity. The UN presence in Goma, in that it could be the failure of the whole program, and of course through that success and failure with respect to the future of Virunga and the thousands of people who now depend on it. So, you know, our relationship, you know, with the UN mission has strengthened over the years. I've been to very appropriately asked, you know, about the opportunities for boosting the successes that have been achieved. I think Goma really is that big opportunity, and it's also an incredibly low-hanging fruit, and that's really, you know, the area that we would want to work with MONUSCO on in the coming months and years.
Well, thank you so much. That's a really fantastic explanation of the logic of how you and your leadership and with Virunga got involved in energy in all its dynamics and providing it to the UN. And in a sense, it's a story of trying to help sustain peace. I want to thank you and all the panelists and all the speakers so far for such a thoughtful, detailed, and forthright set of interventions and comments. It's one of the clearest storytellings I've heard in a long time. But let me now turn to to our audience, Excellencies, colleagues, I want to go for reactions, questions, and recommendations. I already have a number of requests to intervene, and please feel free to let me know in the chat box or to one of my colleagues if you'd like to ask a question or thought. I see we already have a very good Q&A going on with some respondents. But let me turn first to the ambassador from Denmark to the UN. I think she is with us, Marie-Louise Wechter.
Yes.
Let me turn to you first, Ambassador, for the first comment.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Norway, the United Arab Emirates, Irena, Stimson, and Energy Peace Partners for convening this very important discussion, and thank you also for some very interesting interventions from the panelists. We are very curious about the news of the MOU between Irena and the UN, because to us the case is really clear. It has been said a few times today already. We can reduce emissions and costs, and we can increase the security of UN peacekeepers as well as local capacity for renewable energy with these type of projects. So really an excellent case also for intervention in the much talked about HDP nexus, which is not always, we are not always very good to concretize sort of the type of intervention. So let me just to dwell on the development perspective, because it's of course very interesting that UN peacekeeping missions, they operate in some of the least accessible and the most fragile areas around the world, and so they can have a big impact locally. Initiatives like this can contribute to job creation, like and it seems also that if designed right, UN missions have the potential to attract private investors by being a reliable client for renewable energy companies that would otherwise be very reluctant to invest in and operate in these high risk areas. So this is my question, basically how you see, or if there's been made analysis of the development, the sort of the wider development private investors to the generation of. And so if you see any challenges in terms of ensuring local ownership and sustainability of the power generation, also after the UN withdraws. But to conclude, yeah. Denmark, we are very excited about the development. We really stand ready to see if we can contribute in the efforts going forward. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador. I think what I may do is turn to a few other speakers before going back briefly to the panel. I note our time of 2:30, which I will release everybody to leave at, but if the conversation needs to continue, many of us can stay on. I see next Italy. Italy is also on the UN Group of Friends. I co-chair, I believe, with Bangladesh on environment and management issues. Do we have Alberto Daldangan with us? Alberto, over to you.
Yeah, let me thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me thank you very much also on behalf of Bangladesh as co-chair of the Group of Friends, for leader in the environmental management field, for having organized this very interesting meeting. I would like to thank UAE and Norway, Stimson Center, and Energy Peace Partners, Thomas and Irina, for the set of activities that you are carrying out to raise awareness in the use of renewable energies, the peacekeeping operations, and the possible synergies with the private sector. We think that the focus on renewables and you're carrying out can complement and strengthen the activity carried out by the Group of Friends, which deals with all the pillars of the DOS environmental strategy and whose main goal is to support the environmental strategy fulfilled missions launched by the Secretariat in 2016. We have also appreciated the stress on the importance of sharing best practices in collaboration with host countries and local authorities in the domain of environmental management. And we are convinced that these can contribute to confidence building and in some circumstances to the management by field missions of their environmental footprint can provide a positive impact on societies and ecosystems in the longer term at no additional cost for the United Nations, and leaving a useful legacy. So actually, we like the concept of positive legacy, which was mentioned earlier by Director La Camera and SRG Swan, and that is at the center of the second phase of the DOS environmental strategy. And would also highlight, yes?
No, no, sorry, I thought you were done. Okay, continue.
No, and just to conclude my remarks, I just wanted to highlight also the positive, that over the past few years, the General Assembly and the Security Council have been making more and more reference to environmental management as an issue to be given special consideration. And so I hope that this will go on also over the course of the next years. And just the last thing, in my national capacity and also as a FIP committee delegate, to pass on the good results on reductions for the use of fossil fuels. That's very useful to know, and it's a very good news indeed. And this would lead me also to highlight the useful environmental scorecard. I mean, I would like to highlight that this environmental scorecard is a very useful tool that can be provided to the Fifth Committee to have full and updated knowledge of the action taken on the ground. And so I would like to encourage to keep on working it and, if possible, to improve it. But thank you very much for this useful tool.
Thank you, Alberto. I next will turn to our colleague from the ROK Korea mission, Hung Jung-ji Kim. Are you with us?
Yes. Thank you so much for organizing this wonderful event. It was particularly insightful to listen to the voices from the field on how missions can and are engaging with the private sector to increase renewable energy in peace operations. With the 2021 Seoul Peacekeeping Ministerial quickly approaching, today's event serves as a timely opportunity to discuss environmentally friendly peace operations. As the panelists correctly pointed out, there are clear benefits of shifting away from fossil fuel and to scale up renewable energy. So what we need to do now is translate this necessity into concrete reality and actually scale up renewable energy in peace operations. And I believe one of the key elements for realizing this transition is technology. The concept of UN Smart Camp is to integrate existing and emerging technologies into the UN facilities. Among others, it will and improve energy efficiency. Technology will be one of the cross-cutting themes of the Seoul Peacekeeping Ministerial, and the Republic of Korea is planning to hold an exhibition on Smart Camp, which will demonstrate cutting-edge technologies in a number of categories, including environment and fuel. However, we cannot make progress with technology only. As pointed out by many panelists here, strategic leadership matters. Indeed, a shared commitments across UN missions and member states to actually make a system-wide transformation of energy use is needed. And as is highlighted today, the public-private partnership can greatly facilitate peace transformation and harness local renewable energy. The ROK recently held a second P4G summit in Seoul on the theme of inclusive green recovery towards carbon neutrality, and public-private partnership was highlighted throughout the summit as well as in the Seoul Declaration. It was impacts of climate change, which further exacerbates conflicts. As such, it is imperative to make sure that peace operations do not cause an additional source of environmental degradation or climate change. As the host country of the Common Peacekeeping Ministry and as the co-chair of the Group of Friends of the Peace Operation, the Republic of Korea will spare no efforts to this end moving forward. I'd just like to thank you all again for this wonderful event and for this insightful views about this renewable energy policies and peace operations. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. Let me pause there. We've had 3 interventions, and I welcome anyone from our panel, or I'd also be happy to give Assistant Secretary General Christian Saunders, who deferred to others in his opening remarks, a chance to speak. So does anyone want to comment on any of the interventions we've just heard? ASG Saunders.
Overall, most of the important issues have been covered in terms of the need for the UN to walk the talk, in terms of the need for the UN to contribute to the peace operation, to contribute to the SDGs, and to leave a positive legacy. I think part of the issue is, and why there's somewhat inconsistent adoption of renewables for peacekeeping to the peacekeeping is certainly, I think, firstly, a lack of knowledge in the peacekeeping operations up to the level that is needed. I think what we could perhaps benefit from also is some additional partnerships, not only partnerships with the private sector, which we're open to. The UN has been, I'm very frank, been somewhat conservative in the past in terms of its willingness to enter into partnerships with the private sector, but also with NGOs and other actors working in this field. And I think, as Kristen said, I think it's important that you have a certain amount of risk taking as well. There has to be a certain amount of risk taking on the part of the administrators in the peacekeeping operations, in terms of the leadership in the peacekeeping operations, to take that leap of faith and to move in that direction. And I think it's partly also tied to people being absolutely passionate about the issue in question. I think Emmanuel made some incredibly important points, and this is something that the UN is working with in terms of, not just in terms of the environment and renewables, but also in terms of its supply chain in general. UN's annual procurement spend from that procurement spend closer to the point of delivery to make a bigger impact, to help develop infrastructure in the peacekeeping operations where we're working, to help bring about the creation of jobs, and as I said earlier, to leave a much more positive legacy, which of course is clearly will be a big contributing factor to the lasting peace in that particular country or in that particular region. Over.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your joining us here. I want to give the panel, particularly if SRSG Swan is still with us, any final chances for thoughts. I think SRSG Keita may have had to leave. So SRSG Swan, are you still with us for any final thoughts?
Certainly. Well, I would just reinforce that this is a priority for us, certainly in Somalia, and I think increasingly for UN operations around the world. But we're all grappling with the need to be innovative, to come up with new ways of doing business, and we're experimenting with different approaches. So I think the more that we can exchange ideas and see what works in terms of best practices, the better. I believe the Danish ambassador asked specifically about whether there's more systematic analysis of different approaches. I think that clearly continued efforts to document what is being done in different missions. I know there's some analysis that Stimson and EPP have done, case studies, and I think that these efforts, as well as perhaps efforts internal to the United Nations, would all be helpful. Again, this is a time of vision, and I think capturing what's working, what's difficult, how those difficulties are overcome will be extremely important in being able to carry this forward and take it to scale globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, and I just want to note we've had some fantastic back and forth in the Q&A as well, and I wish we could get to all of them regarding other areas of innovations for the UN, and even a suggestion that maybe there could be a case study that compares Somalia and Congo and is iterative. So maybe just to mention a few things. As Dr. Nawal mentioned at the beginning of the event, there are some initial discussions about how to put together a package in which different actors can leverage their mandate and skills to make it easier for peace operations to capitalize on renewable energy and contribute to the UN's 80% renewable energy use target by 2030. We, with Energy Peace Partners and Stimson, have also just completed a case study on Mali, which we're looking to have a rollout discussion on, which could get into some more of the details of that, also around the opening of the UN General Assembly. We're all very excited about phase 2 of the environment strategy, which DOS has rolled out, as well as their partnership with ARENA and the vision that our colleagues from ARENA have put on the table as far as a long-term ability to be very analytic, but also have visionary and strategic leadership. And I think we've had this before, but the Secretary General may benefit if there was somebody who's more of a focal point for getting to the 80% goal by 2030, help the whole system. Also today, I heard a few key themes about thinking about energy as part of a solution for peace, as a strategic leadership issue, as well as a technical one, and as a way of thinking about legacy. The governments that host them. A lot of acronyms came out. We all know about the budget issues, the Fifth Committee, the ACABQ, etc. And I appreciate that many of those who joined us today know how to navigate the Security Council, the General Assembly, and those budget decisions and procurement rules, because in some senses, being able to be both strategic as well as operational will require allies who understand how all of that comes together. So I think with all of that, I want to welcome this conversation. The progress has been made. It's exciting, the innovation in the field, and also the vision that there's more to do. I also want to thank all the panelists for their expertise, their commitment, their perspectives, and to our co-hosts, including the UAE and Norway, for the immense amount of work and energy they put into this with our good colleagues. So with that, I will come to a close of this conversation, and we look forward to hosting you again for more and ongoing discussions about how we can move